Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyle Gold and Cam Hirosaki. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Hello, Smithers. You're very good at turning me on.
You should probably ignore that.
You've been reading my wish list, sir.
Oh. Smithers, you know that dream where they're flying in through the window?
Waylon,
I'm just sitting here doing my
So this is
sound
where
check.
you are, visiting your sick mother.
Don't do this now, John. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the other way around.
Oh, yes, right.
John, so this is your
Yeah.
sick mother.
Yeah. Like, don't do this, Waylon.
I know The Simpsons.
Now we can never say that only straight people have been in this house.
I've been recording.
Have you really?
Oh, so I guess our sound's all right. All right, well, cheers, everyone, and welcome to Unsheathed episode number 54. 55. That's right, 54 was the one we did like 3 times the other week.
I just like to point out that Kyle is not the one who has been drinking.
I am sober Kyle Gold,
And I am 98% sober Cam Hirosaki.
98 and 44 100ths.
It's still an A+.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I would not have it
Grade
any
A
other
rubber
way.
putt.
Grade double A.
Ooh.
What I want to know is how do you
like,
get the job of the inspector that applies those grades?
Ooh, that's a good question. I was going to wonder, like, can I get, like, an eBay ranking, like, A++?
Only 2 pluses? If someone only has 2 pluses, I'm not dealing with them.
Oh, you need, like, 11.
They have to have like a whole row of pluses across before I'll trust them with my, antique Mickey Mouse lamp.
Wow, that's worse than the vote skewing on Yipstar.
I'm not sure I agree with that statement.
Oh.
Because Iftar doesn't allow you to put in.
No, there is no Yipstar anymore.
That's true.
Well, I mean, like, because if you're on eBay and, like, everyone's, like, A, like, quintuple plus or more, like, what does that really say? It was like how somebody did, like, a breakdown of, like, story scores on Yipstar, and it's just like, yeah, like, your mean average score is, like, 4.7 out of 5. So really, what does it tell you if a story has 5 stars?
Well, I think that's true, but I don't think it's necessary. Why are we arguing about this?
Because I'm belligerent? I don't know. I'm not belligerent.
Anyway, we have a confirmed date where if you enjoyed hearing us argue about whether eBay is worse than Ifstar, you can come watch us in person and in San Jose, sort of southern San Jose.
That's California and not the one in Central America.
Right. San Jose, October 23rd. We'll put an address out on the website when it gets a little bit closer, but we've confirmed the date. It is, for those you know in the area, it's the Monoceros Media Studio. Tugrick is quite happy to loan us his workshop for the purposes of a live podcast, and we should have enough room to accommodate the ones of fans that will be flocking to South San Jose to come visit us.
If we hit double-digit attendance, I will be very pleased.
Including Kit.
No, I was saying, like, not including Kit or, like, people who live in the house.
Yeah. I'm not even sure all the people who live in the house are going to be there.
Probably not.
We have Rain First coming up. This episode should be airing the week before Rain First, I believe. So, come out to Seattle. Come see us Friday night at 9. We will have more fun. I don't promise that I won't argue with Cam about bizarre website trivia, but we will at least have an entertaining surprise for everyone. And
It doesn't involve me being pantsless, I don't think.
although that would be it would be entertaining, but I don't believe it would be a surprise.
It would be to me, and that's the important thing.
That's true, although it would not be the most entertaining surprise you've had on this show.
No, it would not.
It's been a little while since I brought that up.
Yeah, yes it has.
You should have seen his expression.
The dreams, oh, the dreams. Speaking of me being pantsless, I do have this cocktail concoction that Kit gave me. I actually have no idea what's in it, and I haven't even tried it yet. For all I know, it's a roofie colada. If things suddenly go from being now to 4 in the morning, and I only have half my clothes, I guess I'll know.
It's all right. You'll always be able to listen to the podcast to find out what happened.
Oh, snap. Whatever it is, it's delicious. Oh, that is good. I think it's got blueberry vodka in it. And chocolate liqueur. And, is there anything else I'm missing? Simple syrup? No? Oh, Grand Marnier. That's right. I was like, there's a third flavor in there. That's good. Do we have a name for this drink? We'll have to come up with one.
So it's sweet and fruity, and it goes to your head. Kind of like us.
Yes, kind of like both of us.
And, I don't know, Kit wants us to talk about what projects we're working on. I'm two-thirds, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the way through Out of Position 2, with the goal being that I'll have the edits done in the next week or so, and I can then pass them off to proofing last stage folks at some point. Hopefully in the next couple weeks, I'll be meeting with the artist about the artwork. And I believe most of you people already know who the artist is, but I'm going to be coy and foxy and not say it on the podcast in case people don't know. Then they can get all head up about it.
And a kerfluffle.
Yeah. But we're hoping that by the time... I would say actually by the time the live show rolls around, we'll hopefully have some pieces of artwork to show off for it.
Oh, nice.
So maybe at the live show I'll unveil the title, and maybe we'll have a cover sketch or something by then. And plus we have the awesome secret... Isn't that Rain First? Right, we have the awesome secret project for Rain First.
Which is not the same as my secret project, which is still happening.
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
So mostly that's what I've been working on is Out of Position 2, and I'm dabbling in a couple other things. I'm trying to get some stories together for Heat, and actually by the time this airs, the deadline will be over already. But
yeah, I'm going to see if I can try to do something by then myself.
And so I'm sure y'all already know.
The tight deadline is good for me because it will ensure that I don't ramble because I won't have time to.
Right.
Plus, writing for deadlines is kind of fun sometimes. Because when you don't write for a deadline, like in the case of Summerhill, you spend a year working on something, and then you're just like, you know what, I'm going to start this all over again, like I just did the other day. That is not a cause for dismay, it is a cause for hope. After writing this thing 2.5 times already, I kind of finally have an idea of what the hell it's supposed to be and where it's going.
And I should point out, starting all over again does not mean you're throwing out the entire story and just starting to write it again from scratch.
Right.
You're just writing the beginning over again.
Yeah, but in the course of doing so, I will likely rewrite the bulk of the rest of it. Just because the way I write is really self-referential, and so if I change anything, it kind of has this domino effect.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna talk briefly about something that I'm doing with Out of Position this time, which I've not done with previous novels. I had previously, like for Out of Position, I read most of it to Kit, but I'm not sure I took copious notes while I was reading it. This time I read about maybe half of it to Kit, and I was taking notes while I was reading it about the way things sounded and the things I wanted to change. And I'm past the point now where I stopped reading it to him and he started reading it on his own. And so what I've started doing is I'm reading the book out loud to myself as I edit it. And it's really kind of startling how when you do that, it forces you not only to listen to how the sentences sound, but it forces you to go slowly enough that you read things like, oh, wait, I know that, this thought was connected to this thought, but that actually works better at the beginning of the paragraph rather than at the end of the paragraph because it leads in from the previous. And because when you're writing kind of free flow, your thoughts jump around. And when you're trying to write a character monologue, it's sort of like, oh, I should go get ice cream, but, well, I don't know. It's so far to the store, and then you're thinking about other stuff, and then you come back to thinking about ice cream, and you're like, no, when you're writing, let's just sort of organize it all so all of these thoughts are in one place, and then it moves logically onto the next one, and it's just a smoother experience for the reader.
A similar thing happens when you're translating.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, when you spend enough time, especially if you're doing it for long stretches of time, when your brain is thinking in two languages at once for too long, in my case, translating into English, like the English just sort of starts to not make sense after a while, but you don't notice it. And, wow, Kyle just made a mess all over the table.
It got very foamy.
It's wow. He looks so guilty, too. I wonder if
my ears are all downcast.
I wonder if the microphones picked that up.
I don't know. Kit didn't notice it, so.
But yeah, so I'm still working on Summerhill. I'm working on at least one other short story. There's another short story that I haven't started writing yet, but I need to start soon, and I can't talk about yet. And there's the Secret Project.
Technically, both of those are secret projects, since you can't talk about the other one.
Yeah, well, one of them is
one
my
of them is
capital.
your secret, and one
Yes.
is not your secret. Yes, I know. Anyway,
I need to.
you need. I think
But my pop secret.
I think you started last week, so I'm going to read a letter while you're chuckling. Dear descabbarded folk, a writing question for you. I think that it's common for there to be a warm-up period at the beginning of a writing session when you're getting back into the narrative and the pace of writing. Then the barriers drop and you're in the zone, pouring out the words back in your authorial voice, relating with the characters. I was wondering if you have the same experience and how much time both of you typically need at the beginning of a writing session to get into that flow. Does the warm-up time decrease as you become more experienced as a writer? I've found I can shorten it by thinking through things before starting, for instance while walking to where I will be writing. It seems to help me get into the right mental space more quickly once I actually begin typing. In any case, thanks again for your insights and charming commentary. Squeaks Nicodemus.
Was Nicodemus talking about writing or having sex? Like, first you have this warm-up period where you kind of just need to ease into it, and then eventually your barriers drop, and then you're in the zone.
Wow, my mind actually didn't even go there. I'm ashamed to say.
My mind usually doesn't go there. I blame Kit's roofie colada. His delicious, delicious roofie colada.
This is actually something that I know a lot of people have trouble with. And for my part, I found that I can usually sit down and just start writing stuff, but it goes a lot more easily if I have been thinking about it. And I'll think about the kind of things that I want to write during the day, and then when I get the time to actually sit down and write them, I've got some momentum already because I know what I want to put down in the story. I keep wanting to say put down on the page, but it's not really a page.
It's the proverbial page. It's a digital page.
Right. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, thinking about it beforehand really shortens that time. Yeah. I don't have much of an issue with that before, but Kit thinks I'm a mutant that way, so.
Yeah, I definitely have a warm-up period and a zone that I get into. This is why I sort of need to do like my whole like zone of solitude thing when I'm writing, because my brain just, I can't write and have anything else going on at the same time other than like listening to music or, occasional whatever. But like if I'm in the same room as like people talking, my mind will just go to listening to the conversation and not on what it is I'm writing and what I'm supposed to be thinking about to write what comes next. Which I think I'm like the anti-Kyle in that regard. Like, if he's a mutant freak who can write while doing anything, I think that I'm just like super crippled and that like I can't do anything but writing or it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Which is why slow office days were great for writing.
I still have to have my headphones on whenever we go out to the coffee shop.
So, oh, yeah. But I like having music on anyway.
And I have to go to the coffee shops with you because if I don't, then loud girls sit down next to me and start yammering away.
And even if I do go with you, they still come.
Well, that's true.
But I at least offer moral support.
Not as bad as last night when I was out to dinner with Kit and this couple sat near us with the screaming baby. It was like being in an airplane, only we couldn't put on our headphones.
But, does it get easier the more you do it? Once again, stretching out my analogy more than I need to.
You are very stretchy. as we saw.
Not that stretchy. I'm really not.
Why are you doing your Lovejoy voice for that?
Because I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, I'm not
What's
sure.
happening?
I'm not sure your analogy works that well, actually.
No, it doesn't.
I'm not sure.
Because
Well-
that means that the better at sex you get, the less time you have to spend on foreplay. It's just like, bam, I'm there, and you really don't want to be there ever.
And also, that's not necessarily true. A lot of people just still need that foreplay, even though they're really good once they get going. I understand.
And the foreplay's fun.
Well, yeah.
And that's sometimes half or more of
and
the
the
fun.
warm-up to writing is fun.
Depending on how long your fuse is, sometimes foreplay's more than half the fun.
I mean, the warm-up to writing is fun, too, because that's when you get to play with the story in your head. You're not constrained by grammar. You're not constrained by syntax. You're not constrained by how fast you can type. It's just the action and the scene and the characters, it's all happening in your head, and you can unfold it like a movie at whatever pace you want, and you can roll things back and push them forward and see how it works. And
then you sit down at the computer, and finally all your limitations and shortcomings come to the forefront and
Exactly.
cripple you.
although
Like somebody
I will
taking
say,
a hammer to the fingers. Sorry.
This is possibly a weird thing that I do. I know a lot of people visualize their stories like movies, and I do that a little bit to some extent, but as I'm doing that, I'm also thinking the words I'm going to be writing and sounding them out in my head. So,
Yeah, I do, like with turns of phrase. And
yeah,
No, I do that too.
you look for the right sentences and things. So,
Yeah.
I would say definitely, and we've said this before, sort of spend your time when you're not actually sitting down at the keyboard, think about the story whenever you can. That makes it easier. And apparently if you think about sex whenever you can, it makes that easier, right?
Oh, it makes thinking about sex easier.
Or
I'm going to move on to our next email.
I think we should.
Dear Canine podcasters, I have been reading a lot of books on writing. Several have gone on how important conflict is to a story, and how without it the story is boring, uninteresting, and pointless.
See The Phantom Menace.
Yes.
Sorry, I just watched those again.
It's true. I know how much you feel about characters, so I suggest that while characters are the story's soul, conflict is its heart. If this is the case, then does erotica need conflict to be interesting to the reader? I've been reading several mainstream erotica anthologies, and there's a distinct lack of conflict in many of them. Also on this topic, I recall one book saying that sex can be used to do anything else for a story. Introduce characters, introduce conflict, serve as the climax, or as the resolution. On introducing conflict, the most obvious is to have the conflict spring up from the sex. Sexual problems, disputes about the sex in question, discomfort, etc. But what about outside conflict, that is, conflict unrelated to the sex in question, rearing its head in the sex itself and becoming present? What are some ways non-sexual conflict can manifest in the scene? Boy howdy, if you don't know how unrelated conflict can come up during sex, you haven't been in the right relationships.
I was going to say one of my favorite scenes on this topic is in the movie Parenthood.
Oh, God.
Do you remember right at the beginning of the film?
Wow.
Steve Martin and Mary Steenburgen are trying to make love, and Steve Martin cannot stop thinking about their kid who's having problems in school, and it's just very funny because they'll be cuddling and sort of going moaning a little bit, and then he'll say, "So what if he's a little high strung?" And she's just like, "Oh, let it go. We don't have to deal with this now."
Or that episode of Friends we were watching earlier where Chandler and Monica want to have sex, but they're babysitting Rachel's baby.
Well, sure, if you live in a sitcom.
But it's still a story, and there's still conflict there.
Yeah, that's
There is
true.
a non-sexual conflict element that is taking place during the scene.
That's very true.
That is legitimate.
Yep.
I wouldn't want to have sex with a baby in the room either. That would be creepy. Especially not gay sex, which is the only sex I'm going to be having. Not in front of a baby, ever. What were his other questions? So he's saying that, we're all on about characters, and that's not to say that we dismiss conflict. Absolutely not. I would never want to write a story without any conflict. Conflict is...
because character growth comes from conflict.
Yes, character growth is what the story is about, but conflict is the method for how the story develops, and it's what keeps the story interesting. If you're just writing a story about somebody who's awesome, no matter how awesome they are, if there's nothing conflict related happening to them, it's a boring story.
Right.
That's storytelling 101 right there.
And I will note that erotica in some ways is a little bit of an exception to this, because the erotica in sort of its most base form, I don't mean base as in crude, but I mean just sort of
At its simplest,
a pure, simple erotica story is just about describing the act of sex.
Yeah.
It's just about something intended to be kind of hot.
Yeah. And then there was fucking.
Right.
Yeah.
The way a lot of people write erotica is they build on the sex, and while the sex is still the focal point of the story, there's other stuff going on.
Yeah. And, I mean, the issue doesn't need to be about the sex that's being had. It can be about any number of things. It's sort of like how we must have talked about it on the podcast at some point, but I don't think we've mentioned it in a while, about how in a love story, the subject of romantic interest serves as the antagonist.
Right.
I mean, like, they're not the quote-unquote enemy, or like how antagonist is sometimes defined in simplistic terms. I mean, clearly they're not, but they are, like, they're the opponent, basically. I mean, like, you need to...
Well, they're the opponent because the goal
Right.
of the protagonist in the story is to establish a relationship with that character.
Right.
And usually that character is the one, either a character quality of that person or the character of that person themselves are opposing the relationship.
Right.
And
Because
they have to figure out how to overcome their objections and succeed in having a relationship.
Right, because, I mean, if the main character, if like your protagonist is like, hey, I want to have a relationship of this type with you, and the love interest goes, okay, sure, that's not really a story.
But an example where that was done well, I actually have an example where that was done well. It was in a Goofy movie.
Oh my god, wow, bringing back the old school furry.
Old school furry.
Welcome to Grey Muzzle Cast, folks. Although, you know what's funny is I bet even the younger furries who listen to this are like, oh, like, sweet Goofy movie.
If you've not seen a Goofy movie, it's surprisingly good for a Disney direct-to-video. Was it direct? Yeah, it was direct. No,
it was in theaters.
it was in theaters.
Yeah.
You're right. It was made by Disney TV.
Right.
It was not made by Disney Features. But
Because then they went on to do Goof Troop.
they do a very nice sort of misdirect on you, where it starts out with Goofy's son being kind of he's kind of the cool nerd type. And
Which is why I think furries identify with this movie so much.
Yeah, and he's trying to get a girl who's not super popular. She's just a sweet girl, and he's like, oh, she'll never notice me, so he plans this whole scheme to get her to notice him, and you're thinking, okay, that's what this movie's going to be about. It's going to be about the kid trying to get the girl. And then she comes up to him afterwards and was like, hey, that was neat. You want to go to the dance?
Yeah, it's like, wait.
And you're like, wait, what?
That works? That never works.
But then the rest of the movie is him. It's about his relationship with his dad, but also about him living up to the person that she expects him to be, or that he thinks she expects him to be. So it actually does that really well.
Yeah.
It's also got a possum costume in it.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Who needs a hug from Lester?
I'm also thinking about, Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
Where you've got, Scott and Ramona. And, they established their romance pretty early on, and then the conflict there is completely external and really bizarre. But, I mean, they are still, like, dating. It's not like, oh, he's trying to get the girl. It's more like, well, I have to do this to keep the girl, kind of.
Right. They've established interest.
Exactly.
It's other obstacles keeping them apart. It's not the traditional romantic comedy.
Yes. Oh, it's not the traditional anything.
No, it's not. But it is a very fun movie.
It is. I want to see it again. I hope is it still in theaters?
I think so.
It must be. It needs to make more money.
We have an audience of one here, I should mention.
Yes.
He's confirming that Scott Pilgrim is still in theaters.
Who I believe we have to thank for, like, the best Merlot in the world earlier. Oh, no. Well, Kitten and he, they're sort of sharing. They're both deferring to each other, so I guess I'll just thank them both and say that, yes, it is the best Merlot in the world. I twit about it quite enthusiastically earlier.
Yeah, so to wrap up, what are some ways non-sexual conflict can manifest in a sexual scene? Whatever non-sexual conflict you have, I mean, sex is sort of the most intimate thing two people can share with each other until we develop telepathy and whatnot. But any external conflict you have can be manifested in that intimacy.
It's like you do this all the time at Out of Position, where it's the stuff that's going on in the rest of their lives that's all like taking place, and it often, actually probably more so in Out of Position 2 than the first one, but still in the first one. I don't want to get too specific if people haven't read it yet, and all the clear examples that are coming to my head are from the sequel because I read it more recently and nobody else has, so I can't say what they are.
I will say, and I think I mentioned this in I think I mentioned this on the Live Journal, that I do have one scene in the sequel that everybody who's read it has said, I know I shouldn't find this hot, but I really do.
Yeah, I know exactly what scene you're talking about. And that actually also serves as an example of the point I'm trying to make. So good job. A++.
Plus. Anyway, hope that answers your question, because we're moving on to the next one. Hey guys, several episodes ago I almost responded to your brief debate on ebooks. Hirosaki-san seemed skeptical of their relevance and or awesomeness. But then I realized there was nothing to debate. I like ebooks and so does Oprah. Are you going to argue with Oprah? Are you?
That's my backwards Oprah plane dream.
Wow.
I don't even remember what that's a reference to.
Anyway, I have an actual question this time. When you're conceptualizing your work, do you ever have trouble deciding what medium or venue would be most appropriate for the story? I recall that Hirosaki-san cited Summerhill as a project that started as one thing and became another. However, I find that I'm often conflicted over the format. Should it be fiction, a screenplay, comic book? Before I've even started. As a result, I have countless ideas in limbo. This is especially true of my stories featuring anthro characters, partly, I think, because I feel obligated to produce accompanying artwork, so the presentation is sometimes limited by my development skills as an illustrator. He sells himself short here, as we'll mention when we read who this letter's from. Do you have any advice for getting past our creative inhibitions and finding the right format? I'm also curious to learn what other storytelling forms you've attempted or how you've overcome similar frustrations. As always, I appreciate your insight. Blender.
I like getting emails from Blender.
I do too. They're always very thoughtful. And
Blender has a great understanding of like craft as a concept.
Yeah.
And I think that this is exactly what this is about, is sort of, and the fact that you would be in a headspace where you would consider multiple media for what you're doing just shows that you have talents in more, more directions than I do.
Also, anybody who doesn't know Blender stuff should check him out on Furfinity. Yep. I think it's just Blender is his username.
Yeah, he's just Blender.
And check out the Diego Lebowski comic that he did.
That was
recreating scenes from The Big Lebowski with characters from The Dog Days of Summer.
Yes, and I think
his
Shadow Fox story is on there now too.
I think it is.
I like his Shadow Fox story, and he and I have corresponded extensively for a few years now, and I'm familiar with a lot of his work because I've read, but I don't know how much of it's public or not. So go to his site, check it out. You'll see what's there.
He's cool.
He is.
I think being of more limited scope of talents than you, we probably don't struggle with that question quite so often. I know that part of my whole impetus to get published was so that I could trick artists into drawing the characters that I was writing about. That kind of worked out pretty well. So
that's sort of like how I accidentally got Black Teagan to illustrate one of my stories.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, your artist fell through, so here, we'll just give you Black Teagan. What? You couldn't see the epic flail I just did on the microphone, by the way.
It was quite epic. Not quite Scott Pilgrim epic, but it was pretty epic.
An epic of epic epicness.
But it is a real interesting question, because I've had story ideas where I thought, this is definitely... Mostly my conflict tends to be between short story and novel, and that's more a question of how much development do I want to put into it, how much time do I want to spend getting to know the characters, getting to know the world, or is it just a single point in time thing that happens? But I've also had ideas and worked with screenplays, and it's really interesting, having worked with the two formats, you can really see how some stories are much more suited to a screenplay.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would make a screenplay out of Position. I would have to
You need to cut a lot of the
I'd have to cut a
characters,
lot of it
a lot
out.
of the side plots.
I'd have to streamline the story, probably give it a bit of a different focus,
Yeah.
and it would just be pretty different. One of the things that we have been playing around with, which we had not really talked about much.
Who's this we?
We is me and Kit.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, not.
Elaborate for the audience. I don't want people putting onus on me for this. I owe them enough that I haven't followed through with.
We've actually been dabbling in putting Vol into a screenplay format or stage play format or radio play format, something like that. Something where characters speak lines in turn, and that's the story. And that's been real interesting too, because a lot of the book had to be cut out. Most of the prologue had to be cut, or most of the early stuff had to be cut.
It starts with him already in Davalia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I found that Vol worked a lot better because the novel itself is already very stagey, kind of. It's broken up much better into scenes.
Yes, I say the scene and act breaks are very traditional narrative.
Yeah.
Much more so than Out of Position or Waterways or any of your other books.
And partly I was interested in doing that because it gave me a chance to fix one of the narrative problems that I have with Vol, which is that nothing happens in the first act. But
he has sex.
Right. Vol is much more an erotica novel than I think any of my subsequent ones have been.
Oh, if you put it next to Shadow, and you can see what a difference a day makes, really.
Or 5 years.
It was 5 years if it was a day. No.
It was. So, I don't quite know what our plans are for that yet. I think we want to maybe produce it as a radio play first, but then, I don't know, we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's been a lot of fun, and it's been an interesting education in what the different formats offer. Yeah.
If you want to dig into the ancient past of Hirosaki and go back to my story compilation, Mercantic, there was a period for about a year where I was convinced, like, oh, this would make a great graphic novel. And I was sort of like, as like a side project, trying to see if I could like rope anyone in to be like the artist on it. And since there was no actual traction going on it, I started just thinking in my head, like, okay, like, just in theory, how would this work? And I realized that it really wouldn't make a very good graphic novel at all. And that's why I stopped before I got anywhere. Because I'm like, yeah, you know what? The more I think about this is actually like a really like mental introspective piece that wouldn't really get a lot out of being illustrated. Basically, you'd get to see things but not understand what was going on in their head without just throwing a bunch of text on it, and at which point the pictures aren't doing anything and you're losing a lot of the text, which means you're losing most of the story. So at that point, okay, this should just stay as a textual story. So that's, I guess, one way to answer your question. How do you know what medium it belongs in? Is what sort of story are you telling and how would it be best conveyed? I mean,
wanting to put illustrations in with a story does not necessarily mean that it can't be just a novel.
Right.
It's become kind of the standard in furry publishing to
de rigueur.
Have illustrated novels, or to have illustrations with your novel, I guess. So my one concern with your letter is to say, don't let the ideas sit in limbo. Start them in one format, and if it doesn't quite feel right, then move to another one. But whatever format you're most comfortable with, just, start going along. Yeah. If you need to draw the characters out a little bit before you get a handle on writing them, then, make some concept sketches, and you can probably learn something about the characters from the way you draw them.
Like with Summerhill, like I wrote it as a short story, and for a short story, it wasn't a huge time investment. And then I had it, and just like, short story is not a big enough medium to hold all these ideas. It's like trying to put 20 pounds of story in a 5-pound bag.
Does 20 pounds of story weigh more than 20 pounds of gold?
Oh. Whoa, hey now. Don't lead me down that road. As I think about it, I'm trying to think of, okay, like if Summerhill were a different format, I bet you could probably do it as a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of surrealist imagery. And, You convey a lot in facial expressions, I think, especially with Summerhill himself.
Again, it would be a little different.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have some of the neat turns of phrase you use.
Yeah, that's true. It is. It would be different, but I bet it could still be done. I don't want to say I could do it because A, I have zero graphic novel writing experience, and B, I certainly can't draw it. But oh god, like if I do end up getting this as a published thing where it'll have like a cover and or illustrations, like part of me wants to just like commission a character sheet for the character of Summerhill like right now because I really want to see what he looks like.
There's people that'll do that.
Yeah, no, I know they are, but I'm just like thinking about like how good of an investment that would be right now.
Although generally, I think you kind of have to tell them what he looks like so they can draw him.
Oh yeah, well, I could give a description of him, but I just want to see him with my own eyes. My mind's eye doesn't count. My mind's eye's not that good, which is why I'm a bad writer. No,
Read another letter.
okay. I think we answered Blunder's.
Yeah, I
pretty
think so.
there. Oh, as for like what else have we done? Oh yeah, you mentioned doing the stage play thing. Yeah, I took a screenplay writing course once, and it was, I got a lot out of it. I don't think I would ever sit down and write a screenplay myself, like just in whole. But no, there's that.
A lot of the stuff in there just applies to story. It's good storytelling.
Yeah, it's good storytelling, and it also makes me more qualified to tear apart movies that are badly made. Because, hey, I took a screenwriting course once, which means I can rip you a new one.
Protagonist.
And Kevin Bacon. So our final letter. Hello, esteemed writers. First of all, I just want to thank and congratulate you for doing such a wonderful job with this podcast. Thank you. That being said, I will move on to the real letter. Same as the fake letter, but with 80% more sugar. And not HFCS. I just started listening to the podcast a couple weeks ago, and have not yet caught up. With the most recent installments. That being said, I apologize beforehand for any questions that may have already been addressed. I just wanted to chime in with a few things to get your opinions on an issue that has been bugging me for some time now. But before I get into the question, I wanted to share my experience about being a writer and the effect it has had on my relationships. I've had previous relationships in which my partner wanted nothing to do with my writing, so it was a part of me that I kept out of the relationship. It wasn't an easy thing to do, and I'm not entirely sure that it did not share a part in the relationship failing. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, I am currently in a relationship with someone who has told me on many occasions that he loves the fact that I write. I know that I have his support in my endeavors. I know that having his support in my endeavors helps me keep writing, and his... Sorry. I didn't read these letters beforehand. Can you tell? And his understanding attitude when I get grumpy due to extended bouts of writer's block is more than I could hope for. Having someone in my life that genuinely cares about my writing on a personal level has been enough motivation to keep on writing, even when I think I should just give it up and move on.
That's awesome.
Thanks to my rudder butt, I will keep writing and working towards my goal of getting a novel completed that is good enough for publishing.
I just want to break in there and say congratulations. It's great to find someone like that. And
yes,
certainly you folks out there all owe probably a lot more than you would imagine to the presence of Kit in my life as far as producing works and getting stuff out there.
I too have been in relationships where people didn't care about my writing, and these are also all past tense, so make of that what you will. I too am in the future.
Actually, our listeners are in the future. We're in the past.
Oh, yeah, we're the gray muzzles. We're always stuck in the past. That being said, I now come to the aforementioned question, and I would greatly appreciate your views on it. I'm a sucker for happy endings, so you must not read my stuff, and making sure that things always turn out right for my main characters. Again, probably not a big fan of my stuff. However, I've come to realize that in order for my characters to grow, and for the sake of the plot in my novel, that bad things are necessary. Without obstacles to overcome, there isn't much conflict. How do I detach myself from my characters enough to write situations and outcomes that might not be ideal for the character? I don't want to simply torture them, but pain, loss, and inner conflict are necessary for the story. Is there any way to help remove the protective bubble that I as a writer tend to place around my characters? Thank you for your time and for the hours of entertainment you bring your readers and your listeners. Best wishes, Thane. No, torture your characters, seriously. Your story's not going to get anywhere until you make them miserable and they have something to strive for.
Think about the stuff that you've had to deal with in your life. Think about the failed relationships, the stresses that you went through with your other partners who didn't care about your writing, or whatever other stresses contributed to the end of those relationships. Think about how it felt for you to go through those, but also how it felt for you to come out the other side. And know that whatever you're doing to the characters, it's perfectly fine to have happy endings.
Yeah.
You can put your characters through conflict, and I think it becomes easier if you put them through it knowing that on the other end of it, they're going to be happier. Like, you can start out with a character, typical love story. You can start out with a character in a relationship that's not good for them, but which they're reluctant to leave for some reason or another. That relationship comes to an end, which is sad and stressful and hurtful for the character, but you know that you're doing it, and the more pain they go through, the better it feels when they come out the other side. So, if you think of it in those terms, it becomes a lot easier to do horrible things to them.
So not to bring up Star Wars again, but it is actually a good example in this situation. So, okay, Luke
You
Scott...
struggled with that for several seconds.
I
I
was.
could see that in your face. You were
So,
like,
okay, Luke
I don't wanna
Skywalker.
use
All Luke
example.
Skywalker wants to do is go out and get these droids and bring them back to his farm so that, he doesn't get yelled at. And when he gets back, his family has been burned alive, and he, finds their charred corpses. And now suddenly he's being pulled along, on this quest. And he's got, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the one guy he can, lean on for anything. And basically, the whole rest of his world hinges on him sticking with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then he gets, cut down right in front of him.
Yep.
And so now he's an emotional wreck because of that, but he still goes on to save the day,
That's what
Yeah.
motivates him.
Exactly.
That pain is what pushes him. The loss of his family, the loss of Obi-Wan is what pushes him to do the extraordinary things that he does do. And they never fully make up for the loss.
Right.
But the ending of Star Wars is a happy ending.
Exactly.
Despite
Unless
the
you're
fact
the
that-
Empire.
As-
From a storytelling
as a viewer-
perspective, Star
as
Wars
a
is a
viewer,
happy ending.
Trust you to take the side of the Empire.
Oh, well, only because I don't want the ISB coming down on me. That stands for Imperial Security Bureau.
I'm back to news radio again. In tragic news today, the Death Star was bombed by terrorist rebels and blown up. Fortunately, Lord Vader escaped with his life. Our
Do you
hearts
know
go
that-
out to the families of all the Imperial guards killed in the space station.
Do you know that within Star Wars canon, the Empire explained away the name Death Star was something that they came up with in commemoration of all the Imperial citizens who had been killed aboard it?
Wow.
And so this was their sort of thing. It's just this horrible tragedy that happened to us.
That's really entertaining, because I hadn't thought before. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just a space opera, so it's called
Yeah.
the Death Star, but I hadn't thought, if you're actually a government trying to rule a bunch of people, why would you name your big ship the Death Star? That's very entertaining.
See?
Wow.
But yeah, no.
Now I'm spending several seconds thinking about Star Wars too. Look what you've done, Thane. Look what you've done to our podcast.
No, seriously, the reason I
thing actually
I
right-
don't mention Star Wars all the time just because I'm a Star Wars nerd. It's because it is such a textbook case of storytelling and hero's journey and all these things.
Well, and also because everybody's seen them.
Exactly, it's a baseline. I can talk
And the-
about Star Wars and assume that everyone knows what I'm talking
The
about.
early ones are good examples, and the later ones are bad examples.
Yeah,
so you have
exactly.
the whole spectrum right there.
Yeah, and conversely, if you look at the Phantom Menace, like you're saying, nobody really goes through any hardship in that. Nothing's really at stake. I mean, Qui-Gon dies at the very end, but up until then, what has Obi-Wan done? Nothing.
Right.
He doesn't do anything in the story at all until that point.
And
then
we
he
don't
just
really-
kills Darth Maul because he's angry, and he just killed his master.
And we don't really see much bond between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon at all.
No.
We're told about a lot of stuff, but we never really see it.
Well, they spend most of the movie apart.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Again,
anyway.
bad story writing.
Yeah.
But no, to elaborate my first point where I say no, just torture your characters, I don't literally mean torture them, but yes, they are your characters, but the way I look at it is you want to have your characters earn happiness and not just have them be handed happiness, because it feels a lot more satisfying.
Exactly. And another way to say it, back when we were talking about conflict in Rashawn's letter, conflict is the way, when you're writing a story, you're writing about a character taking a journey. And I think I've talked before about the device that you see in a lot of amateur storytelling, which is, Joe protagonist is just kind of settled in his life until something happens to make him go on a journey. And it's very difficult to get characters out of their life to pursue a journey. So a lot of these fantasy books begin with the families being killed, or the throne being taken over, and all this. But I've sort of strayed a little bit from my point. The character's journey is about learning something new, and learning something new and growing as a character. And learning something new is much more effective when it's applied in the real world. And so what you want to give your character a choice. You can do things the way you used to do them, or you can do them the new way you've learned how to do them. And the best way to make those choices, and there has to be a lot at stake in the choices. It can't just be, should you sort your CD collection alphabetically or by album title or by artist, because that doesn't make a difference. But the question is, should you... Yeah. I'm
the
drawing
Matrix
a blank
did
on
this
anything.
pretty well. Where it's like, look, like something's going on. Like,
actually,
like the world. Example. Yeah, like the world is not what you think it is. We can either send you back to your old life and have you not know anything about this, or you can commit yourself to seeing this through. And that is, it's a very he very literally hands
very literal
him a choice.
Yeah.
Take the blue pill, take the red pill thing.
Yeah, it's not exactly the character arc, but.
No, but it is that sort of the character begins their journey because they're willingly making a choice to undertake it.
Right.
And it's not like, we've killed off Neo's family and now he has no choice but to do it. He decides to because he's presented with this.
And I mean, I guess,
and he's presented with the stakes, really.
I'll use Out of Position as kind of an example. Out of Position at the core is about honesty and communication, honesty with yourself.
Right.
And it starts with a couple of characters who are both being dishonest about who they are.
In a very sexy way, but
in very different ways. And the book presents Dev. Dev is more the main character of the first one. The book presents Dev with a choice to continue to live in the way he's been living, or to make a change in his life and choose a path that entails more danger, but also entails more honesty.
Right.
And that choice has very real consequences. There's a lot at stake for him, and it's a real world choice. It's not like Dev suddenly, people say, well, hey, you should be more honest and open with people, or do you want to just keep being private and being yourself? And he's like, I think I should be more honest with people. And then the book ends.
Like that, and that conflict is never succinctly spelled out like that on the page, which is good, because if it were, it would be kind of lame.
Right. It would be filmed as an after-school special. But that's the kind of thing that you want. You don't want the conflict to be purposeless. You don't want, as you said, you don't want to just torture your characters because you like seeing them suffer. Well, you do, but but it always has a purpose, and the purpose is to make the character make a choice, and to make the choice reveal something new that the character's learned, or a reinforcement of what the character already knew. You can start out with an honest person whose honesty is being tested through conflict. There's Wall Street.
Oh yeah,
is a case of that, where you start out with a character who's honest, is drawn into the world of crooked finance and shown all the benefits of it and tempted, and he has to make a choice. Does he go with the crooked people and have the high life, or does he take the more difficult, honest path?
I can't believe they're redoing that.
They're not. They're doing it well.
Is it a sequel?
It's a sequel, yeah.
Okay.
It actually looks kind of interesting.
It does, and it has a good cast.
Although I didn't like the first one very much, but
it served as a good example.
Yeah, it was good. it was a good example there.
You don't need to like something to be able to appreciate the merits of it, which is another point that I think that our readers should understand.
Yes.
You don't have to like something to be able to appreciate it.
But that's probably a discussion for another time.
Yeah, it would be an interesting one to have.
So, Thane, I've actually, I've read a couple of Thane stories, and he's got a good handle on narrative and telling a story. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see what he does with conflict with his characters.
Okay.
But
I've seen his name pop up before, but I'm not familiar with his stuff myself.
But at the heart of it, there's a very basic way to break down a story. A very simple story, simplest story plan. Your character wants something. There's an obstacle. He has to figure out how to get around the obstacle in order to get what he wants.
Right.
And then you can play with millions of variations on that.
The complexities of the themes built on that.
How he gets around the obstacle shows you what kind of character he is.
Right. Then there's like the difference between what does the character want versus what does the character need.
Right. And the difference between want and need is the want is the tangible goal, like it's the high school girl who wants to win the beauty contest.
Right.
And the need is the sort of the less tangible character part, which is
Out of Position is
another
good example of this.
The girl needs to know she needs to learn to appreciate her inner beauty and not blah blah blah. And then you also have the opponent, who symbolizes the wrong way to go past the obstacle, and the way the character goes past the obstacle symbolizes what they're learning, and they can not achieve their goal, but in not achieving their goal, they still succeed in becoming a better person and completing their character arc, which there's Rocky is the movie that's the best example of that.
Yes. Good call.
I actually won. I've never seen that movie, but I won a $5 bet with a coworker once about how it ended.
Really?
I did.
Well done.
So, in summary, conflict is important, and
it is integral.
Don't shy away from it. To sort of directly answer your question again, the more pain you cause the character, the more earned and the more valid the happy ending feels, provided you do it right.
Right.
As opposed to just, you're tortured and then they get set free and whatever. So there's right and wrong ways to do things.
I'm not going to go off on another ranty tangent, I promise.
All right. Well, as always, thank you for the letters. I feel like we had some really good discussions tonight.
Yeah, I did too.
Write to us, unsheathedpodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter and LiveJournal as Kyle Gold, Kyell Gold. And I'm on FA just as Kyle, though I haven't posted anything there in a while.
And I'm just Cam Hirosaki on all of those.
And we will be coming at you live from Rainforest
in just a couple of weeks.
On September 20, whatever that Friday night at 9.
So, okay. 28th is a Tuesday, so Monday be 27th.
Well, it's 2 weeks from...
Yeah.
So today's the 10th, so it would be the 24th. Although that... No, that's right.
We're going to have to use math.
Yeah, so it'll be September 24th, 9 p.m., sometime somewhere in the Marriott Hotel. Look for the con schedule, and we will have an extra special surprise there, in addition to just our two presences at the site where we had our first live podcast. Mm-hmm. If you recall, that we turned the adult writing panel into the live podcast, and we had no idea if anyone was going to show up.
That was one of the happiest surprises of last year for me, was how,
it was super awesome.
Well it went over.
It was.
And we met so many cool people at it.
We did. And we'll see probably many of them there again. And hopefully many new friends, too.
Please come back. Tell your friends. Let's double pack that room.
Yep.
Like a red fox between... I was going to say like a red fox between a fennec and a gray fox.
Well done, sir.
We're going up Hayward, going down on Hayward.
I got a tweet about that today. Someone was like, I'm only 8 pages into Bridges, and already there's a 3-way. And I'm like, well, it's kind of... It says it right there on the cover, doesn't it? But maybe not explicitly. Anyway, we will see you...
It's called Bridges because he gets stabbed full of dicks. No. That's not why it's called Bridges. That's just one of the 87 layers of why it's called Bridges.
Say goodnight, KM.
Good night, Cam.
Keep writing, folks.